Oh, hello. Welcome once again to Stuff and Things, where I like to talk about stuff and occasionally even things. I'm your good friend Bradley, and today is a Sunday Stuff and Things. And on this Sunday Stuff and Things, oh boy, I've got rocks holding down papers here. I have stuff and things to talk about, including upcoming videos, things you can look forward to on Stuff and Things YouTube and Stuff and Things Patreon. We're going to talk about light and how light can very heavily influence the look of your photography. That is obvious. At its most basic, photography is using light to etch something onto film. And maybe we don't think about that as much if we're doing digital photography, but I think about it a lot because I'm doing a lot of film photography lately. And I just want to kind of talk about that. It's hard to define exactly, but I live in a place where there isn't a ton of ambient light all the time, and that really affects the look of my photos. I said that kind of strangely. And I was looking at someone's work the other day. There's a photographer named Marcus Anderson who lives in Sydney, Australia. I'm not going to post any of his pictures on here. That seems like it would be weird. But he lives in Australia, and as you would expect, there is usually very, very strong, harsh, directional light. And it just creates such a difference. His photos often have so much contrast, huge contrast between the light and the shadows. And a lot of my work, at least from 9 months out of the year, it's a sunny day today, but typically it's kind of a really even flat lighting because it's overcast, it's usually very dim. So I don't know, I just want to talk about that a little bit. I think it's interesting. We have a box opening from our good friend Ted Stryker. Ted is a Patreon supporter. He has sent me things in the past, and I won't, well, actually his address is on here, but my P.O. box is there. Well, you don't need to see that anyway. It's in my YouTube description. So he sent me this. Curious. I'm assuming maybe it's a blend, but we shall see. And then, of course, we'll have your questions, comments, and feedback in hashtag askstuffandthings, and we will end the show, as usual, with our Patreon shout-outs and updates. There is a sand flea on my camera. Get off of there. All right, stay tuned. Alrighty. What can you look forward to on Stuff and Things YouTube and Stuff and Things Patreon? Well, this coming week, we will have first impressions for the series is Pesse Canoe. So this is Gladora. Series is Pesse Canoe, and then the blend is Latakia Flake 20. So I did the first impressions video of this. That will be posting this Monday, exclusive to Patreon. The week after that, on YouTube and Patreon, we will have how I organize my negatives and digital files. Sounds boring. It's not, I swear. If you do film photography especially, but even if you do digital photography, I go through my way of keeping all of that in order and not having just a giant mess of 1,000 different files where I don't know where anything is. And then the week after that, exclusive to Patreon, will be the Gladora Pesse Canoe Latakia Flake 20 full review. So, lots more good stuff coming up. We're gonna have a lot more good photography stuff coming up as well. So stay tuned for all of that. I am grabbing my light meter here. It's a little Seikonic Flashmate L308X-U. So today, as you can see, it is a bright sunny day. It is April 24th as I'm recording this. And if you know anything about film photography or just photography in general, you might have heard the term the Sunny 16 rule. And that is basically that if you have, I don't know how technical I want to get here, but you can look at my camera. I've got 400 speed film in this camera. So when you're talking about film, the ISO or the speed of the film is set. That is what the speed is. You can expose to add or take away a stop from that. So if I wanted to expose this at 800 speed, I'm not really changing anything because this doesn't have a light meter or anything like that. I'm just in my mind mentally thinking that the speed is 800, the ISO is 800, and then I'm adjusting my exposures to compensate for that. And then when I'm developing, I am developing it differently. So you can sort of push the film, you call that pushing the film when you're developing, you're not getting any more light in the film, but you are developing it as if you were. So we're not gonna get into all that, but the typical Sunny 16 rule is that if you have a bright sunny day and you take the film speed that you're shooting with, and if you are at f16 on a bright sunny day, then the film speed should be the reciprocal of your ISO. So I have 400 speed film in here. I don't have a 1/400th film shutter speed here, but I do have 1/500th. That's about what it should be. So on a bright sunny day, I should be f/16 for my aperture, and I should be 1/500 for my shutter speed. Now you don't have to shoot that. You could go to f/11 and shoot at 1/1000 if you wanted to, because most people don't want to shoot at f/16. But that's the general rule of thumb, is that on a bright sunny day, you are at f/16 with the reciprocal of your ISO. Now, if that were the case, on a bright sunny day like this, you would expect for me to meter at f/16 with the light that we have, because I have my ISO set at 400 and I have my shutter speed set at 500 or 1/500. So let's meter here in the Pacific Northwest on a bright sunny day. I'm pointing this directly at the sun. I am getting f/11. Now it's almost f/16. It's f/11 and then it's like 0.9. I don't know if that's actually point. I don't think it uses a decimal system. If I do this again, yeah, we're at f/11. So you could maybe get around shooting it at f/16, but typically here, no matter how bright or how sunny it is, I'm gonna be metering at f/11. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to shoot those exact settings. You can change things in either direction as long as you make an equivalent change in your shutter speed, but that's the rule of thumb. So if I'm metering, like if I go into the shadows here, I'm assuming I'm gonna get f/4 or f/2.8. I am getting, yeah, 2.8. So how many stops from f/16 is that? 5. So it's a -5 from my baseline. So if I just keep that in my head all the time, I'm typically doing this mentally anyway now, but if I were walking around and I go into a shady area and I think, oh, it's probably gonna be like f/4 here, then I'm just mentally thinking -4 stops. So if I'm at f/11 or if I'm at f/16 at 1/500, then I would typically be like f/8 at 1/125 or something like that. So these are the mental things that you do when you're running around shooting. The whole reason I do this preamble is that, you know, light is obviously super important for when you are actually exposing your pictures, but light is also very important in just how your pictures look. Now, if you look at me right now, I can hardly see my screen because it's so bright, but you'll see that one part of me is very, very shadowed, and then I have a part here that hopefully isn't blown out in the highlights. I have a spider web just came out of nowhere. That's weird. Spider. Oh my God, it's all over my camera. Must be spiders flying around on their webbage. Anyway, so you can see that I have kind of a harsh shadow across my face. Now, that will tend to make an image look higher contrast because you have such a difference between the highlight area and the shadowed area of your subject. Now, if you're walking around in a place where it is very bright and very sunny all the time, you're gonna be walking around where there will be buildings casting shadows, telephone poles, power lines. There will be all sorts of things that are gonna be casting shadows over your scene. So even if you don't intend to take a very high contrast looking picture, it's going to look very high contrast unless you are upping the exposure so much that the shadows, you've lightened the shadows to such a degree that you've blown all your highlights out, and that's probably not going to look very good. So you are, just by the nature of the kind of light you are getting, you are going to end up with areas that are in deep shadow and some that are very bright. Where I live, where 9 months out of the year it is pretty much overcast, I get very even lighting because it's kind of directionalist. The clouds act as like a giant softbox for the light, and then the light gets very diffused over the entire scene. So you don't have strong shadows, you don't have bright sunlight either. Everything looks more even, and it can kind of look flat too in a way. The harsh sunlight and the shadows can add more of a three-dimensionality to the picture sometimes. So it's just interesting that when you end up walking around in an environment like I do throughout the entire, you know, pretty much fall, winter, and into spring, where it is often overcast, often cloudy, often very diffuse, kind of even dimmer lighting, you don't look at the shadows the same way that you might, and I don't think about contrast in the same way that I might if I lived in a place like Sydney, Australia, that other photographer I was talking about. And I noticed that a lot of his pictures, they are really contrasty, and even when he's not in those really harsh lighting situations, he does tend to favor a more high contrast look, whereas I don't. And I think so much of that has to do with just the way I see the world all the time. I don't usually see a really high contrast world. I usually see a world that is more diffuse, more even. So isn't that weird? Like, I don't know. It's just interesting to me that I guess you could make, I think it is more popular if you just look on Instagram to have a higher contrast image, but I tend to gravitate to the opposite of that. I kind of like a less contrasty image, and not no contrast. I like a little bit of contrast, but I think it is just the way I see the world. And it would be interesting for me to go to a place, like I haven't done film photography in a place like Texas. I've visited places like that, in the last few years, but I was doing, more digital photography then. And I think if I were really aware of that light, I wonder how long it would take for my internal kind of meter to shift into that sort of way of taking pictures, and whether or not my preference would switch more towards a higher contrast image. So I don't know, I just thought that was kind of an interesting observation, and I'd be curious to hear any of you who are photographers, if your climate, if the quality of light where you live, do you feel like that's really affected the way you look at photography and the things that you're looking for when you are taking pictures? Let me know in the comments below. But now, gang, we are going to open this box. This is from our good friend Ted Stryker, a Patreon supporter. Where would be the easiest? I guess just right on top. We're going to slice this baby open and see what we've got here. Let me resheath my knife. All right. I'm assuming it's going to be a blend. If we look inside, I feel a tin. Okay, oh, don't want to litter here. I think there might be a note. Okay, we've got a tin. I'm gonna wait to show you that until I read the note. Thanks again, Ted. Thanks for being a Patreon supporter, and thanks for the blend. So, it's 2 Post-it notes, and there's a hair on it. Gross. As you are an avid enjoyer of vapor blends, I thought you might like this one, which is my personal all-time favorite. Hope you enjoy. T. Stryker. P.S. Ample drying for this one. Take care not to pack it too tightly. Don't you be telling me how to pack my pipe. All right. Thank you, Ted. The blend is, oh, interesting. I've never actually had this. This is 4 square curlies. And it looks like there's a date on the back here. Wow, is this from 1988? It says 3/16/88, so yeah, I guess it is. I've never had this. I have heard of this. Made under the authority of George Dobie and Son Limited, established 1809, originators of fine pipe teas. Small mellow discs of spun teas, each with a complete blend. All right, yeah, I've heard of this blend. I have never had it. I don't know much about it other than it is a vapor. I've heard that it can be similar to something like Luxury Bullseye Flake or something. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to trying this out. Thanks, Ted, very much. This will be showing up on a video exclusive to Patreon sometime in the near future. All right, gang, but now it's time for hashtag #AskStuffandThings. Remember, if you have a question for me and you would like it answered on the Sunday Stuff and Things, you can tweet at SATBradley with the hashtag #AskStuffandThings, but you probably shouldn't because nobody does, and I never read Twitter/X anyway. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can write to me via Patreon, go right to the front of the line, or you can hit that super thanks button under this video and go right to the front of the line as well. We have some feedback from last week's Sunday Stuff and Things. This first one is from @MichaelCase, who says, so I was talking about the value of modern Leica lenses. Michael says, from the beginning, Leica cameras were expensive. In the 30s and 40s, Contax cameras were half again as expensive as Leicas. If you are looking for value, don't buy new Leica. Yeah, and when I was looking back at the price of, I think I looked up what my, I can't remember the numbers anymore, but what my M4 cost new in 1970 in the US. Now, all of these are kind of vague, and I don't know for sure that these are true. But from what I could tell, my M4 would cost about double what a competitor's camera would cost back then. So yes, Leica was a premium brand back then, but now their cameras don't cost double. Now they cost quintuple or sextuple, and their lenses are you know, 5, 6, sometimes 10 times more what their competitors' lenses are. So they've always been expensive. They've never been comparatively as expensive as they are now. Then we have at the New Media of the Dawn, who says, I have found AI very hit or miss too. So I was talking again about AI in photography. The other day, I couldn't find a record of a conference that my friend hosted in 2011, but I'm sure it's online somewhere. For looking at basic questions that are found on corporate mainstream websites, it's usually good, but even then, yes, double check. And yeah, and that's kind of where I am with AI. Obviously, there are all sorts of different uses for it, but as far as I'm concerned, I think one of the most useful things is just using it to go through a ton of data and extracting information out that you're trying to find. So if you were a writer and you threw everything you'd ever written into an AI model, and then you could use that to kind of collate that and keep track of things that you had done. Next we have at Chris Coffee, who says, I probably shouldn't be advertising this, but since one of my many hats I wear is accredited coordinator for our denominational seminary, I have found AI phenomenally useful for writing self-study narratives for our accreditation process. I can feed the AI all of the evidence we have, give it the accreditation standards and the 1 to 5 rating scale descriptors, and it will give me honest answers when I instruct it not to make stuff up. Without that, my accreditation job would take all of my time, and I have to be a pastor of 2 churches and teach for the seminary. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I don't know. I'm not gonna come down and decry something that people are using AI for. If it's not something that needs creative writing, if it's just kind of dry technical stuff, then I don't really see an issue with that. And then our good friend Megan says, I still get inundated with ads pushing AI on YouTube. It's just everywhere. I think it's problematic that these LLMs, large language models, hallucinate this much, and yet people treat it like it's gospel. A while back, a lawyer was caught using an LLM to argue a case, and it turned out it was making up cases that it was citing. It should go without saying that you need to vet the information before you present it anywhere, but especially in court. I didn't hear about what happened with that, but I would hope that he got disbarred over such gross negligence. Not to be pedantic, but I think you're conflating scrubbing with scraping. I still understood what you're talking about, but I think it's worth pointing out. Yeah, I think I answered this in the comment, but I was talking about using AI to scrub through information, and that is kind of an editing term. It doesn't mean like scrubbing it out. It means if you are doing, I mostly have experience with this with using digital nonlinear editing suites, but you can grab the tape head, which is just, you know, they still use those terms even though you're not using tape anymore, obviously it's digital, and you can scrub through a bunch of video and like very quickly see, you know, you can like look for the scene you're looking for. So that's what I meant when I said scrubbing through. It's an ongoing issue that AI is scraping the internet for information while simultaneously scrubbing its sources. When you enter a prompt on an LLM, it never cites where it pulled that information from. Sometimes they do, but it's kind of vague. Conversely, websites like Reddit that are user content driven are blocking its content from other platforms, all while selling all their user data to Google for AI training. Also, many news sites are blocking the Internet Archive from archiving their pages. We're losing records of this moment in modern history as we speak. We're seeing 1984 play out in real time. I just don't see any benefits to AI as a whole. It's destroying critical thinking, and there's a plethora of stories on Reddit, I guess that's a subreddit, teachers about how it's impacting students in the classroom. Yeah, I can only imagine what trying to teach must be like now. When, you know, when I was a kid, the funny thing was like, oh, you have a book report on, I don't know, the War of 1812, or you have a report you're supposed to give on the War of 1812, and if you were one of those kids whose parents bought the encyclopedia sets that were always advertised at the grocery store back in the day, you might, if you were lazy, just go to that encyclopedia and kind of copy out the heading for the War of 1812, and teachers would be like, you're just using the encyclopedia, you're not supposed to do that. Now, I can't even imagine how difficult it is to prevent, you know, plagiarism and people just using AI to do their work for them. But we also have some feedback from the first 2 rolls with my vintage Leica 50mm Summicron Rigid. So we have Ortzi Landa, who says, if you haven't watched that video, you should. I show a lot of cool pictures that I took with that lens, and I talk about what I've been thinking of that lens as I've been using it. Ortzi Landa says, beautiful lens and very nice pictures. Enjoy your Leica lens. Thank you. At Michael Case says, Summicron, not a Summilux? Oh well, LOL. A great lens, my friend. Of course, you can push the film to get a bit more contrast out of it if you wish. So he's making a joke that the Summilux is our Summilux 1.4? I can't remember, but the Summilux is an even more expensive Leica lens. Summicron is an f2 lens. Summilux is, I think, 1.4. I can't remember. And then, yeah, when I mentioned that the lens was lower contrast, I didn't mean that as a negative. I actually kind of like the lower contrast in the lens. And then at Vinny Listland, or, oh no, Vinyl Island. Okay, not Vinny Listland, Vinyl Island says, there's a reason why Ken Rockwell, he reviews a bunch of photography gear online. There's a reason why he calls this the best 50mm lens ever made. I have a 50mm Summicron DR, that's the dual range, and when I first used it, it utterly blew me away. If you ever get a chance to use the 50mm APO, take it. So that's just another lens that it's a more modern Leica lens that has more correction optically. I don't even understand exactly how it works, and I certainly wouldn't throw away a Leica APO lens. I would definitely try it if somebody gave me the opportunity. And then at Lensman says, it's the universal opinion of Leica gurus that the 50mm f2 Summicron Rigid is still the pinnacle of Leica's optomechanical engineering achievement, and for good reasons. Although we are talking about a Leica that was family owned and not this one that is owned by venture capitalist and hedge fund outfits. The Rigid has a slightly softer and lower contrast rendering from the other Leica lenses, but its resolving power is phenomenal, and perhaps that is why Leica also produced the dual range version of this lens for close-up work. They really do not make them like they used to. Yeah, the sub-heading for my Leica 50mm Summicron Rigid video was, they don't make them Leica used to. Get it? And then at Caballero Shot says, I picked up the Voigtlander 50mm f2.2 for my M2 and it matches it perfectly at half the price with modern lens coatings and sharper results. Not to mention the 0.5mm focus is really cool and is now a super lightweight setup. Never liked the infinity lock on lenses nor that button focusing tab. Well, I'm glad you got a lens you liked. I did look at that little f2.2 color scope R, I think it's called, the Voigtlander. But the whole point of my video was that I liked the more vintage rendering. And I wasn't necessarily looking for the modern lens coating and the sharper results, even though I think that the 50mm Rigid is super sharp. And you say it has a 0.5 minimal focus. That only works if you're using a digital camera. It doesn't work on a film camera because the lens coupling only goes to 0.73 meters, I think. That's as close as you can focus on a Leica M film camera. So that would have no benefit for me whatsoever. But anyway, thanks for writing in. I'm glad you got a lens you liked. Thanks for all that feedback. Please keep it coming in. It really helps make the show go. I feel like we've got another long one on our hands, gang. But we will continue on with the very best part of the show, and that is where we thank our Patreon supporters. Remember, if you would like to support Stuff and Things on Patreon, there is a link in the description box below, and it is much appreciated. It is basically the only way I'm able to keep making these videos. YouTube is not what it used to be, gang, and YouTube revenue isn't what it used to be either. So your support on Patreon makes it possible for me to bring you the things you like. If you like anything you see on YouTube, and if you're interested to see that stuff early and ad-free, $5 a month gets you in. If you liked any of the stuff that I used to post on YouTube about the pipe hobby, and you would like to continue to see that stuff, that all goes exclusive to Patreon now, including an archive of all the old pipe blend reviews. So, every week we like to shout out those who support Stuff and Things at $25 or more a month. The producers of Stuff and Things. People like Jason Buckner, Arcturus, Ashes of the Phoenix, The Friendly Piper, GreatGrol, Glenn, Just Glenn, David Severin, Nicholas James, Kyle Whitmore, Mr. Gibson, Chris Caughey, Ryan McFadin, our good friend Ted Stryker, and GandalfTheGrey. And of course, the Maniacs, the crazy people who support Stuff and Things at $100 a month. People like the stolid and dependable Bob Magee. And we'll never forget our dearly departed friend and Hall of Fame member, Peter Straub. Gang, what can you look forward to exclusively on Patreon this week? Well, first of all, we will have on Monday the Gladora Pesse Canoe First Impressions. That's the Latakia Flake 20. And then on Thursday, from the archive, we will have Dunhill, My Mixture 221B Baker Street review. Interesting. That review was from January 25th, 2017. So, lots of good stuff coming up, both on YouTube and on Patreon. Thank you all so much for watching. I have to go try to find some place where I can relieve myself, because remember I told you they put those outhouses out here? They're gone. They took them away again. I don't know why. And they also mowed all the tall grass, so I can't micturate in that either. So we're gonna have to figure something out before I have an accident. So until next time, until we meet again, I've been your good friend Bradley. You've been the audience. This has been Stuff and Things. I'll see you later. Ugh.